Okay, so I'm going to talk about this Mythicist Milwaukee thing that's taken place, and what spurred this on is watching a video from Matt Dillahunty. Now, I've been asked a few times over a few weeks what do I think about this Mythicist Milwaukee before it happened, while there was all the pitchforks and all this kind of stuff from Christy Winters and her mates with regard to this, trying to get, let's be honest, trying to get certain speakers deplatformed from it, which was what she was effectively trying to do. Just bringing it to their attention is what she was doing. Sorry, just bringing it to their attention. But that's fine, you're allowed to do that, of course. And I didn't really know enough about what was going on at the time. So, as it's gone on, I've been spending a little bit more time on YouTube the last few weeks, so I've got a little bit more perspective on this. And then I watched this video from Matt Dillahunty yesterday, an hour and 9 minutes long, worth watching, good video, a lot of bits that I really agreed with, and thought, not just that I agreed with it, because that doesn't make it a good video because I've agreed with it, but bits that I thought were very perceptive, and it wasn't a very biased video, I didn't think. I thought he just spoke about, just genuinely gave his thoughts on all these different things and was prepared to take all the necessary, what he saw as all the necessary shots, regardless of the direction that many was shooting. So it was a worthwhile 1 hour and 9 minutes, I think. And I say that from somebody who's had a bit of a run-in, I think, with Matt Dillahunty at one time over the Atheism Plus thing, and we exchanged a couple of emails, and it seemed to be getting on quite well, and then I don't know whether I'd said something or he'd seen something that I'd said, and I don't want anything to do with you, let's not speak again, sort of thing. So I never really knew what that was about, but I don't hold that against him. He's entitled to think I'm a twat. I am a twat, so he probably was right on that. You know, he's usually right. He's right on that as well, wasn't he? But I thought he was right on a lot of this to do with the Mythicist Milwaukee, especially when he said that effectively it was just a fuck up from start to end, really. And I think it probably, when you look at all the different things, and I've had several different people speak about it now, it probably was in some ways. And some of that was self-inflicted. And I think some of it was the hyperbolic crowd creating a shitstorm and then going, look, shitstorm, we told you, which is a kind of bit self-fulfilling. Maybe I'll come back to that in a bit, but there was an element maybe of both. First, let me say, all the discussion I've heard about it, even from some of these people, the Winters crowd, don't seem to understand the difference between a skeptic event and an atheist event, and just use the two as if it's the same fucking thing. And that particularly irks me because it brings me back to a bit of an argument PC Myers got into with the people that run TAM, the Amazing Meeting, and then he took it to me and he said, oh look, you're saying we shouldn't have feminism in these things, well what about atheism, you wouldn't mind having atheism? And I said, no, actually I fucking agree with the people at these events that's not appropriate. And the reason it's not appropriate is that one thing that skeptics organisations have traditionally done is kept religion out of it. Seems a little bit odd in some ways, because they're about debunking the supernatural, and yet they tend to steer a path clear of religion. But that is their right. Just because it's called skeptics, right, and skepticism doesn't mean it has to mean about being skeptic. You don't have to take it literally, that it's about being skeptical about the price of cod on the Grimsby fish docks, right? It doesn't mean about being skeptical about just about anything. It can be about specific things, as I said to PZ Myers at the time. You call your fucking blogging network Free Thought Blogs, but you've said yourself, don't take the name literally. Free thought doesn't mean you can just, you know, you're free to think what you like or whatever. In some ways it means the exact fucking opposite. So don't you start taking it literally when it suits. But there's been quite a bit of conflation there. I went and had a look at the Mythicist Milwaukee website, and it seems they're very interested in the question of religion and belief and gods and all this kind of thing that goes along with it. So there wouldn't really be a skeptics event. This would be a sort of atheist or an atheist/religious event, you know. This is the kind of thing where we're discussing critiquing religion, really. So I suppose if you're going to put it nearest to one, it's nearest to an atheist event. So I think that's quite important. Matt Dillahunty, I think, and quite a few people have suggested that maybe these weren't very appropriate speakers. We're talking about, of course, Sargon of Akkad, shoe on head, and I'm a skeptic. From my perspective, I kind of agree with that. I agree with it 66%. Given that it's effectively an atheist event, right, or an atheism versus religion event, Armoured Skeptic is absolutely the right kind of person, I would say. If you look at his material, his earlier material, especially, the thing that made him famous on YouTube, really, or made him as famous as he is on YouTube, let's not go over the top, made his name on YouTube, it was to do with religion and atheism and belief and criticising Christianity especially. So he's absolutely relevant to that, I would say. He'd be just the kind of person that you would want on YouTube, perhaps, to go and speak there. Shoe on Head, not so much so. In fact, not so, because she doesn't talk about those things. Sargon of Akkad, this is what I don't get, right? Apparently they invited him because he's an atheist, and they're trying to get a bigger audience or get more interest. But so what? He's an atheist. He very rarely talks about that. That is not what his channel's about. His channel is about politics and about socio-politics. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But I don't see that that's relevant, really. I mean, sure, you might get some more people in because he's got a big following, but why not get a band in then? Or why not get a fucking comedian in? Or a fucking juggler or something like that? Right, why not get somebody to talk about, I don't know, get somebody off one of these fucking reality TV shows to talk about their experience on Love Island or something. Because that's about how relevant that is, really, for me. So I think that is a valid point. And even when the Christy Winters of this world are saying, I don't think, they're not valid, some of these speakers, I think there is a case for that. The interesting thing is, where were all these complaints for the past 5 fucking years of Skepticon? If you're not familiar with what Skepticon is, it started becoming quite a big skeptics event. The likes of Matt Dillahunty were attending, and that was till about 2012 and all the free thought blogs bollocks. And then they kind of took ownership of Skepticon, which is supposed to be a skeptics event, and effectively it became Feministicon. Effectively, it became intersectional Feministicon. And if you go and look up Skepticon and look at the people that have spoke the last few years, go and look at some of the material. I mean, I'll link you, because this is the sort of high water mark of how shite Skepticon became. A speech by Greta. I say speech. I mean, it's like watching one of these sort of silent film actresses, with the high drama acting to sort of totally over the top. It was like an hour of this shit. And it was this year after Donald Trump had been elected. And I mean, I'm no fucking Donald Trump's a twat, right? And I can understand people being pissed off from that political perspective, especially Donald Trump being elected. But you've never heard such a load of over-the-top fucking garbage, and she keeps it going for an hour. And if this is good content, if this is something that's worthy of being at a skeptics conference, then I'll eat my fucking hat, quite honestly. Absolute fucking garbage. Where's been the criticism of this? Seemingly you can have a skeptics conference, and if it's effectively just a left-wing political event, that doesn't get challenged. But this atheist one, well, hang on a minute, there seems to be a slightly disproportionate preponderance of centre-right speakers here. Whoa, we're politicising one of these events. All of a sudden, it becomes obvious that one of these events is being politicised, when some of the other events have been highly politicised for several years now. So I kind of found that a little bit ironic, really. I wanted to talk about the sort of hyperbolic reaction, but I kind of agreed with Matt Dillahunty on that. But one thing that he was quite clear on, let's talk about the Sargon thing first, and this tweet to Jess Phillips. I don't want to get, I could talk about that for 3/4 of an hour. I've made my feelings known on this before. I'll make my feelings known again. I think it was an obnoxious and nasty tweet. And I just wish, I wonder if Sargon, if you could have a secret chat with him that he knew wasn't going to go any further, would say, do you know what, I wish I just apologised for it at the time, because this is lingering and lingering and lingering and lingering now. And it isn't just the normal, usual suspects that you'd expect to criticise him. You know, if he breathes, they're going to fucking criticise him. Let's be honest. And make a big issue about it. But it's other people. It's people like Aaron Rath, Seth Andrews, Matt Dillahunty, me, if you like, that will say the same thing. That really, whatever... Ultimately, when you say something, whatever his intentions were when he made that tweet, it's been interpreted time and again in contexts that are not pleasant, you know. And I kind of agreed. One thing I said right from the word go, the claims that it was like a threat to rape or anything was bollocks, right? I said it sounds like, you know, I wouldn't even rape you. Sounds like I wouldn't touch you with a barge pole. I wouldn't fuck you if you had a bag over your head. I wouldn't fuck you if you had a bag over your head and I had a bag over my head in case your bag fell off. It sounds like one of those kinds of childish, nasty things that typically men will say women to have a bit of a fucking poke at them. But a particularly nasty version, because rape's included. Apparently she's been sexually assaulted or raped or something. So that had an extra little element to it there. And whatever was intended by that, the way that it's been taken generally by people that are quite reasonable-minded people, I would have hoped would have given Sargon pause for thought. It's difficult, isn't it? Because once you've nailed your flag to the mast over something, it's then hard to say, oh, okay, yeah, it was wrong and I'm sorry. And you almost need that period of reflection, of being able to stop talking about it for 6 months and then to be able to come back and say, right, okay, this is where I'm at. But I think it's to Sargon's discredit that he keeps trying to defend that. And one of the things that disappointed me about the event was that, you know, there was the hyperbolics crowd that kept going on and on and on about this. One thing that could have happened is Sargon could have come to that event. I mean, like I say, I don't think he was the appropriate kind of person because he doesn't fit with the remit of the event as far as I'm concerned. But he could have had a discussion on 100 different fucking things there. You know, it's not like these things had to be discussed. Did they really? They don't have to be discussed. There's lots of other things you could discuss. And it's kind of odd that the hyperbolics crowd made sure that they were discussed, right? Made sure that this tweet was discussed, and then sits back and goes, how is this making atheism look good? How is this portraying us all in a good light? When these things are getting discussed on stage. When these things are getting discussed on stage, because effectively you've made it impossible for these things not to be discussed on stage. Like I say, effectively they've said, whoa, this is going to be a shitstorm. This whole thing's going to be an absolute fucking shitstorm, you know. And then just keep beating at it, and effectively created the monster that they've claimed is going to be created, and then gone, whoa, look, shitstorm occurred. Well, it will have been, because you've guaranteed that that's happened. You've guaranteed that it had to be about these particular things. And then you're pointing at these things and going, well, how does that look good? Well, yeah, okay. The other tactic you could have done is not to have created an environment where these things had to be discussed on stage. That said, with regard to the crowd cheering at that, I mean, I understand that some people were there supportive of Sargon and perhaps pissed off with some of the shit that's been constantly dredged up, but I don't see any grounds to cheer that, right? I've got to side with Kevin Logan on this, for fuck's sake. I don't see any grounds to cheer something like that. Just sit and listen to what each parties have got to say if you've got it, but I just... That does sound weird, I've got to say, and probably if I was a woman in that audience, I might have felt a bit intimidated and like, what the fuck? As a man, I might have felt that, actually, I think. Possibly, it does come across as a little bit weird. Matt Dillahunty, one of the highlights of Matt Dillahunty's video was that he took us, as well as criticising Sargon for that, and criticising the event for the things that we've discussed with the speakers, and also for this documentary that was made that they were going to show about that Madeline Murray O'Hare, and the way that she'd been misportrayed, and that they were effectively brown-nosing up to the guy that had made this series, when effectively he's a fucking deceitful cunt, it would seem, profiteering on the back of misrepresenting somebody, right? He also had a real pop at the Hyperbolics crowd, and the people calling this a Nazi event. Now, I don't know how far, because he didn't want to name names for these different things, but I'm pretty sure Steve Shives is involved, was one of the people that he will have been having a real pop at there. And I was really impressed with Matt Dillahunty's stance generally. With slapping down on this totally over-the-top rhetoric, which doesn't help, and is just bollocks. But also with what he talked about with free speech. He made some excellent points with regard to that, and with regard to differentiating between not being... Yeah, it's so simple. It's not fucking complicated. And yet, how many times is it misportrayed? The difference between not demanding that people aren't allowed to speak is not the same. You know, saying people ought to be allowed to be invited to something is not the same as saying that you have to give somebody a platform. And Matt Dillahunty is very clear of the difference with that. You don't have to give these. If there are people you don't like and they don't like you don't like their opinions, you're not under any fucking obligation to give them a platform. Right? But that is not the same as demanding that they cannot have a platform, that they cannot be heard. And as he said, because he started talking about university campuses, and quite clearly, he is not happy with these anti-free speech wankers that are trying to get anybody whose political opinions they don't like deplatformed from universities, even when they've already been invited to speak. And he says you've no right to do that. You know, the contractual obligation, the socially contractual obligation we have under those circumstances is that you're allowed to have the people you want to speak to represent your views, and you're allowed to do all of that. But the quid pro quo is that other people whose opinions differ from you are allowed to do the same thing. All students are paying for their tuition, and those other students are paying for their fucking tuition in exactly the same way that you are. So you don't have a right to dictate both who you get to hear speak and who they're not allowed to get to hear speak. And I think he was damn right with regard to that. And it's very, very worthwhile listening to what he has to say on that. Okay, I think that's pretty much all I want to say. I do apologise in the fact that this has been a little bit poorly structured with regard to this. The whole thing sounded like a bit of a fuck up, to be frank. Badly organised, people being invited and then uninvited because they'd made pro-paedophilic comments. People being invited not because they're relevant, because they're controversial. Then that being elevated to such a stage that what took place actually at the event weren't issues that were necessarily worth discussing, but were the most controversial things those people had said in their fucking careers with regard to Sargon of Akkad, which again isn't helpful. And who's responsible for that? Well, I think, like I've said, there are several different groups of people you could hold responsible, including the people that think that the sunshine shines out of their arseholes. Have got some element of responsibility, I think, with regard to that. Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a shit show, I think. Okay, that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, bye now.